Ladies and gentlemen, football fans alike, it is your host, Steven Trader, back here as always for the first official content of the 2026 NFL Draft. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come a long way since the last year in the off season. Obviously, 2025 NFL Draft. You can go back on some of my previous videos and check out my content from last year and the past 2 years to be able to get some insights and analysis on prospect evaluation. But we are officially here for the 2026 NFL season. Can't be any more excited. Can't be any more anticipated for what this year's draft has in store. And I think it's one of the more polarizing ones, one of the more headline topicing drafts. I think in terms of quarterbacks, labeled upon as being one of the worst quarterback draft classes that we've had in recent memory. I don't know how long ago you would have to go back in the past to be able to come back to a time when maybe we've had a weaker core of guys. And, this is exactly why we are recapping the Senior Bowl from this past weekend. Obviously, I was physically there in the midst of everything that was going down. I was there at a few practices. Obviously, didn't catch the game in person, in the flesh, is what I was trying to allude to earlier. But ladies and gentlemen, we are back here to be able to come up with some excellent content for this channel and be able to give you guys some in-depth analysis of what I think. Also, what you guys think as fans, obviously. Did you watch the Senior Bowl? What did you think of the performances? Who was the guy that really stood out? Who was the guy that, maybe performed very poorly through the practice drills, through the overall totality, the large body of work that was the 2026 Senior Bowl, obviously, which I thought was, like I said, a really, really interesting evaluation of many of the players. But let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right into it. And for my biggest takeaways, obviously, we're not going to go, necessarily 1, 2, 3, of who the most impactful guys are. We're going to just do a little bit of a rundown of each and every single position on the field, starting from quarterback, going all the way to, a few defensive guys. But, obviously, this was the big headline of the event. And I think most football fans, including myself, maybe, people who aren't as invested in the offseason as I am and as many of my contemporaries are, but this was really the most intriguing aspect of this entire weekend and this past week. And, obviously the game, gains a lot of, notoriety and traction more so than the overall practices. But I was there Wednesday just to get a little bit of a, up close and personal perspective of a lot of the guys. Obviously, it means a lot when you're there in the flesh, just seeing, size, being able to see, air velocity and passes, and, being able to see, the overall totality of the field, be able to win, the opportunity to be able to go down there and be able to see these guys up close and personal. Obviously, get an opportunity to meet a couple of players, be able to get to know what sort of some of these guys' personalities are. Let me tell you, I do think that going into this week, there was a lot of guys that we just do major enigmas. Not a lot of clarity on a lot of it. And you look down the list. I mean, Diego Pavia obviously was a big headliner guy. I believe he checked in at 5'6", really small guy. I got to see him up close and personal. Be able to show a couple of videos I got him with his throwing motion and whatever else. Yeah, he is a relatively, in terms of height, really smaller guy. He does make up ground with his big bulk body, and obviously, we talked about it also at the season. One of the things that we like the most about Diego, obviously, with his game is I do think he uses his overall bulkiness to his advantage whenever he plays the position. Obviously, I think he's got some tremendous power, mobility to his game, which, I've gone on record many times to say that I do think that's the most unique and tangible for a mobile quarterback to have, is some excellent power with his legs and with his upper body and everything like that. I do think Diego Pavia obviously has that to his advantage. Obviously, I think, over the past couple of years, it definitely stands out like a sore thumb when a guy's super small. Obviously, a lot of scouts and everyone likes to make a big publicity about it. Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback from LSU, big time drop in terms of his productivity from this past season. for the Bayou Bengals. Obviously, a major underachieving season for him. And obviously, I think there's a lot of guys in this year's crop of quarterbacks who a lot of people could refer to as having underachieving seasons, not only in terms of their productivity, but their overall team. If you talk about guys like Drew Aller from Penn State, you talk about guys like Kate Klubnik from Clemson, I think a lot of those guys would fall under that label and assertion of guys who played for teams in terms of their productivity was just not, emulating the same success as what they had the previous season. And a lot of people thought they could be able to take their game to a better level, to new heights. I got to admit, man, I really enjoyed what I saw out of Garrett Nussmeier this past weekend. And spoiler alert, I'm going to go ahead and, get off my chest. I think he was the best quarterback of the weekend. And, watching him through the practice, I don't think he was that captivating as maybe a guy like Sawyer Robertson from Baylor. I even think Talon Green from Arkansas, who, by the way, polar opposite of Diego Pavia, is a mammoth of a man. He is a absolute, the man is literally just a pole. He is a fucking pole. He is a humongous human being. But Garrett Nussmeier overall, man, as soon as the game kicked off Saturday, I think he really just took full control of the offense and everything else. You saw a lot of that pass efficiency to his game that you had seen from his journey at LSU, particularly with a short intermediate game. I'm just, so widely impressed. And I think it's continuously proof in the pudding that, he's the kind of guy that you can be able to take to the next level and be able to find ways to mold and develop him into something special. Obviously, dad is Doug Nussmeier, offensive coordinator in New Orleans, obviously. So he definitely has that, coaching in terms of his family and what his relationship with his dad is. Obviously, he's got a great mentor there. And obviously, I think he's the kind of guy that's going to be able to push himself to the next level and obviously push himself through the Senior Bowl. Really impressed with what we saw with Garrett Nussmeier. And also shout out to guys like we mentioned, Sawyer Robertson from Baylor. I really do think that what we were able to see from him was some very impressive work likewise as well. So, I think he was a guy that really stood out to me likewise as well, particularly during the drills and the practices throughout the week. Love Sawyer Robertson, man. I'm a huge fan of his. I've said it all throughout, the season. I think he's a guy that's going to be a guy that could be able to ascend as a top 5 quarterback, not only through his body of work throughout the college football season, but going into the draft process as well. I think he definitely be able to, was able to make him some money off of his Senior Bowl performance. And also Cole Payton from North Dakota State. Shout out to him. Small school product. Obviously, he's a really interesting one. His playing style, honestly, watch a guy on tape, sort of synonymous to that of Diego Pavia. So I think maybe if you're a scout or analysis and, you're thinking about, looking at a guy like Diego Pavia who was on the bigger stage, obviously playing in the SEC, I think a guy like Cole Payton maybe screams to you and says, hey, playing style, very similar. We're getting some real good exposure to what this guy can bring to the equation in terms of being a quarterback in the next level. And I think he's a guy that really pops off as well. Running backs. Like I said, we're just going to go down the line. No particular order. Seth McGowan from Kentucky, man. Watching him through the drills and the practices through the overall week, man, I was very captured by, his slippery elusiveness. He's also a very smaller player as well. But, when it pertains to the running backs, it's not really a massive knock or any bugaboo that comes in the way, man. A guy like Seth McGowan just ultimately screams a late-round gem, in my opinion. I really love what he was able to do through the drills and everything else. He's a really interesting guy as well. Katron Allen from Penn State. Of course, him and Nick Singleton were both down there in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Got to see both of those guys up close and personal. Great dudes, got great camaraderie with each other. Obviously, splitting carries at Penn State for the past 3 years. They were really excellent. I love Katron. I really think of the two guys, I think the distinction a lot of scouts and analysis want to make is who is the better of the Penn State running backs, because I think that's still up for grabs. Everyone knows Love from Notre Dame is better than Price, and I think that's pretty unanimous. But a lot of people are sitting here wondering who is the better of the Nittany Lions running backs, and I think Katron Allen is a guy. Not only does his tape speak for itself, but I think he looks really elusive and really in shape throughout his practices as well. I was really taken away by those guys. I even thought Jamari Taylor throughout the game also shows a lot of traction as well for me. I'm just like, this guy from Virginia bursted onto the scene big time in terms of his productivity for a really good Cavaliers football team through the ACC, obviously making it all the way to the title game in Charlotte. Jamari Taylor, Katron Allen, and as we mentioned, Seth McGowan earlier. I think they're three guys to me. And I'm not going to pick one over the other. Just pick your poison of whichever one you may want to go back and watch some tape of. And, I just really think that both of these guys, man, all three of them just scream late round gems. And, that's something that we keep seeing in the league over and over is super slippery, elusive running backs who slide through the cracks and, end up going to organizations in day 3 or, late in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. And, teams are able to invest in running backs and build them into something. You saw guys like Isaiah Pacheco go all the way in the 7th round for the Kansas City Chiefs. You've seen guys, so many guys throughout the league. I mean, I also can't, forget about a guy like Aaron Jones for my beloved Green Bay Packers, who was drafted in the 5th round from UTEP a few years back, once upon a time ago, and ended up being one of the best running backs that we've had in the past couple of years. So, you're always going to get that guy. Of course, there's guys I'm probably forgetting about. Obviously, some very obvious ones that I think maybe, Algier from BYU is another one that sort of pops off right off the top of my head. Alvin Kamara was a 3rd-round pick. So the league is going to continuously let guys fly under the radar. A lot of teams are like, well, damn, who's going to be that guy? Is it going to be this guy? Is it going to be that guy? Is it going to be that guy? This is what the offseason provides us a lot of clarity of. This is what the Senior Bowl provides us a lot of clarity of. This is what the NFL Combine in a few weeks is going to be able to provide much more clarity of. I just think, look, Jamari Taylor, Katron Allen, and Seth McGowan, I think these are some guys that really were some popping off guys throughout the Senior Bowl. And I think these are guys that are very much worth the watch. Now, the wide receivers, man, going into this week, there was a bunch of wide receivers I was really intrigued by. And I think, every year you get into this thing, there's always this guy that, has a chance to maybe be a sleeper, if you will. Maybe a guy that emerges in the 1st round or as a day 2 investment that a lot of people are going to want to go after. A diamond in the rough, if you will. But, man, through the practices and everything that I was watching, I was like, there's a lot of guys that stood out. But Malachi Fields made an acrobatic catch that really was a jaw-dropping play where I was actually standing at the Senior Bowl, was right there behind the end zone. I actually saw it right there in real time, and I was astonished. I don't know what other reaction you can be able to imply in a certain setting like that, but Malachi Fields was the guy this past season at Notre Dame, dude. I really think he really came into himself for the Fighting Irish this past season. Was sort of more prominently utilized as a slot receiver, as many of the guys who came from the Virginia program came to Notre Dame, and I think he really just morphed himself into a guy that's definitely going to be able to have himself a role in the NFL, and maybe it's the role that, he goes back to being a slot receiver at the next level. Either way, I very much see him having an impactful role in the NFL, one way, shape, form, and fashion. You even saw him convert on the 2-point conversion from a pass from Garrett Nussmeier in the Senior Bowl game. Also through the drills, a lot of guys also stood out to me, but I'm going to tell you a guy a lot of people in the sports media haven't been given too much love throughout this week was Kevin Coleman Jr. from Missouri. Every time I saw him win a 1v1 rep, easy for you to say, right? 1v1 rep this past week, I was just, wow. I was taken away with, how easy he was able to get off, with his release, how easy he was able to work leverage on the outside, winning against these guys who are going to be playing at the next level in the one-on-one drills. Kevin Coleman Jr., much like Malachi Fields, and this is another really astonishing thing to me, is throughout their collegiate careers, I think a lot of times you watch the tape, you watch their journey, they really stick out as slot receivers. And particularly Kevin Coleman, man. He was a guy from Missouri this past season. I was at times very underwhelmed with. I'm like thinking, is this really Missouri's #1 pass catcher? He really primarily catches a lot of his passes from the slot. This is a mesh guy. This is a stick route kind of guy. But I'm telling you, 1v1 against really elite group of corners that I think we were able to witness at the Senior Bowl. He really stood out excellently. So I think Kevin Coleman Jr. definitely deserves a shout out. I'm going to get to the tight ends here as well, because I think it can't go without saying that, we've already praised a lot of guys of the offensive skill positions, but the tight ends to me really were very underwhelming. And obviously I do think it's no mistake a lot of the tight ends that we saw this past week were underwhelming. A lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of the tight ends that we saw down here in Mobile were not well developed or well productive tight ends through college. You saw the backup tight end for Ohio State. You saw a couple of guys who are Sam Rouse from Stanford, who just didn't get the opportunities to be able to catch passes as much through college. And I'm sure, they will be utilized as blocking tight ends at the next level. Teams, certain schemes prioritize that. Certain schemes want that out of their tight ends. But, I was very underwhelmed, particularly in the game with a lot of guys dropping wide open passes. I remember Sam Rouse out of Stanford dropped a wide open pass near the sidelines. I was like, wow, it's just they're a little foreign to catching passes. They're a little foreign to having these things thrown their way. And I was very underwhelmed with the tight ends. No indictment to those guys. Wish them the best. But like I said, a lot of guys really stood out. But I think, look, man, if you're really looking for an ultimate winner from this Senior Bowl, we've seen it 2 consecutive years now already. But man, let me tell you, man, like these offensive line of scrimmage guys, man. We saw Zabel, obviously, from North Dakota State, who put on one of the best Senior Bowls I had ever seen. I even liked a couple of other guys through the Senior Bowl. If you go back to last year and watch a couple of other guys, Arasi, who played for the Texans last season, I thought he was very impressive at times. A couple of other guys that were late-round picks I was really astonished by, such as Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech. But, hey, one thing that stands out about Zabel that's very obvious is that he's starting in a Super Bowl Sunday. So never underestimate a good left guard in the NFL. I've watched some tape of Zabel this past season. He's been really excellent. Speaking in a guard position, to me, the best impactful player on the offensive side of the ball would be none other than Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech. I absolutely love what Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech was able to do in the one-on-one drills. Everybody on the internet just absolutely gushes over watching offensive linemen push defensive line pass rushers out of the way, be able to put their asses in the turf, if you will. Keelan Rutledge is no stranger to that. This guy is a guy who likes to see guys be planted in the grass, be planted in the end zone, and he is the kind of guy that's want to kick ass and take names. That's sort of what the embodiment of that Georgia Tech program pretty much is, and what is what Brent Key wants their team to be notorious for. Keelan Rutledge is a prime example of that. And I really loved what he brought to the equation through the one-on-one drills. He was really outstanding. I'm not putting him in the same category as Gray Zabel from last year. Zabel was an all-star. He was a complete all-star last year in Mobile. He was one of the most breathtaking, captivating players that a lot of guys saw. Keelan Rutledge definitely deserves a pat on the back. He did an excellent job. He was really excellent. There was a lot of guys I was really impressed with that offensive line group, but I think Keelan Rutledge, to me, is a huge standout. And in terms of his value, he's a guy that I haven't quite got to his film yet. Very much like Gray Zabel last year. Very, early into the process, in the month of January. Offensive line is not particularly the position you're going to be, wanting to watch as soon as possible. But when you see guys like Keelan Rutledge and Gray Zabel at the Senior Bowl, it makes you fall in love with offensive linemen pretty easily. So I can't wait to get their tape and be able to get some evaluation. I don't see Rutledge going later than the second round, based upon what we saw right there. He opposes with power. He's an excellent playmaker at that position. Let's get to the defense. This is where I would differ, in contrary to a lot of my other contemporaries across the internet and across YouTube and other podcasts and other platforms. But I've heard a lot of people rave about the edge rushers, particularly pertaining to guys like T.J. Parker, particularly pertaining to guys like Logan Fano, and some others. I just, we all know the rep that Parker ran. We all know the rep that Derek Moore ran. They were very impressive. They're huge, humongous human beings, by the way. Size is something that is not lacking in their department. But I want to give a shout out to the guys who I think size is even more bulkier and size is even more of their platform. But it's the defensive line guys that really captured my eye at the Senior Bowl, in contrary to a lot of your true edge rushers and stand-up DNs. But to me, I really like Zane Durant from Penn State, Grayson Halton from Oklahoma. I thought were some guys that were ultra impressive. And by the way, obviously, I'm not too proactive when it comes to coverage or insights throughout the college football season of player evaluation. But let me just go ahead and tell you, Zane Durant and Grayson Halton are some guys that, going into this week, I was really interested in watching them at most in particular. And I was not disappointed. Zane Durant, obviously, last season particularly played opposite the guys like Abdul Carter, played opposite the guys like Dennis Sutton, who was also active at the Senior Bowl. I think he's the unsung hero of the Penn State defensive line from the past 2 seasons. I think he's an awesome player. I think he's got some excellent pass rushing ability coming from the interior teeth of a defense. I really love what this guy brings, dude. He's a really awesome player. Grayson Halton as well. That's what's really interesting about these two dudes is they both got that edge rushing capability. And, Oklahoma's defensive line dash edge rushers this past season was so damn prolific. And Venables is an absolute mad scientist when it comes to his utilization of edge rushers and defensive linemen and just defense in its own aspect. Grayson Halton was once more another insane presence when it comes to getting after the quarterback, being a backfield disruptor. I love Grayson Halton. And they popped off huge during the drills, not just the one-on-one D-line versus offensive line, during the 7-on-7s. I really thought this was something that was really captivating, particularly guys like Durant and Halton, man. A lot of other guys were some impactful guys. I think Caleb Banks from Florida is another dude who I think was sort of interesting. By the way, shout out to Caleb Banks because, man, he dealt with a lot of bad injuries this season at Florida. And by the way, I'm just going to give him an overall shout out. He's a really awesome dude, true Florida Gator at heart. So shout out to Caleb Banks and the Florida Gators fans. They got a really good defensive line guy who I hope can be able to build his reputation back up. But don't get it twisted. Zane Durant and Grayson Halton made them some real money today. And much like Keelan Rutledge, I think that these are some dudes who will not go farther than the second round. Mark my word for it. Linebackers, man, let me tell you, don't ever underestimate a linebacker. They may not have the sexiest drills at the Senior Bowl, but we knew going into this thing there wasn't a whole lot of great linebackers going into this thing. Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech, man, like the heart and pure soul of Texas Tech football this past season. Absolute anchor. And look, these are the kind of guys I fall in love with in the pre-draft evaluation process. Heart and soul linebackers, hammerheads in the middle of a defense, guys who are going to knock your ass on the ground, guys who are totally in control, the quarterbacks of a defense. Jacob Rodriguez is all that. He's an awesome player. Figured I'd give him a shout out. I was very impressed. Not only his Texas Tech film, which I think is some of the most impressive film, the body of work that he was able to accomplish. He's a great dude. I want to give him another shout out as well. That's another very special, sincere thing about the Senior Bowl. It gives us opportunities to meet players, get to know who these guys are at heart and who they are as men. And obviously that's a big thing that's going to go a long way in the NFL. So shout out Jacob Rodriguez. I think he was by far above and beyond the best linebacker that participated at the Senior Bowl. Let's get to the defensive backs, man, because I think there's a lot of guys here at this particular position that stand out. Now forgive me if I can't pronounce his name right, but Prysock from Washington, during the overall game, I thought he was really impressive. He was actually a dude that I was really intrigued by coming into the overall Senior Bowl. I thought he was really awesome, but may not be the sexiest of positions, when it comes to the defense backs, but I thought strong safety, free safeties, a couple of guys really stood out to me, but one of which was, Deshaun Singleton from Nebraska, who actually had one of the interceptions in the Senior Bowl game. Great zone instincts. I think he's the kind of guy that not only will he contribute as maybe an excellent depth player to the next level, but maybe find a role on special teams. I think is somewhere where he can really find his footing in the NFL. But man, this goes without question. Of all the guys we've talked about, Rutledge is my ultimate star when it comes to the offense. Defensive MVP is Bud Clark from TCU. Bud Clark from TCU is an absolute baller. Not only is he a baller on the field as a ball-hawking safety, production doesn't lie. He's instinctive. He's sound. Great vision. But his personality is an A+. Rodriguez is a great guy. We had mentioned from Texas Tech. Heart and soul, he's an A grade as well. Bud Clark is a absolute relentless motor of a player. He wants to intercept every single pass that's thrown his way. He's got great heart. He's got great skill. He's exactly what a lot of teams are looking for in a safety. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a guy like Kalen Bullock, who plays for the Texans in the NFL. Kind of like a guy like we had seen with guys like Cam Kitchens from Miami, who plays for the Rams. A pure ball-hawking safety, a guy that's got insane zone ability to the point where it's almost merely a no-fly zone when you throw the ball to him in the zone. It's almost just like essentially you're in danger of having a pass intercepted or you're going to have a ball stripped. Bud Clark is one of those kind of guys. High motor player. He doesn't give up on the football, and he wants to make a play on the football on every single play. And I'm giving this guy a tremendous shout-out. He's great in the one-on-one drills. He's great as a personality to have in a locker room. And I just want to say, for the people out here who's like, well, personalities in the locker room are not a big deal. It's all about the skill. Hey, it's about the skill and it's about the personality, because we got a Super Bowl coming up on Sunday between the Patriots and the Seahawks. And, if anybody follows any NFL action throughout the playoff, throughout the season, that Matt Collins, who plays for the Patriots, is one of the biggest personalities in the league. And he's a great spark to that locker room. And I think Bud Clark can be able to deliver the same kind of energy to a locker room, to the level of a Matt Collins for the New England Patriots. So shout out Bud. Man, Bud, you are the guy. And Keelan Rutledge, shout out to you as well. You are the man in terms of the offense. Overall, I just like I said, the Senior Bowl is a very divine moment to me. Everyone knows it's sort of the Kickstarter to the 2026 NFL draft. It's always a Kickstarter to any draft process, really. We've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Past 2 years, it's been an absolute joy to go to the Senior Bowl and enjoy meeting so many players, coaches, fans alike, and being able to see these guys up close and personal. So it was an opportunity that I would absolutely recommend to any NFL fan. A lot of guys who want to be able to get some exposure to some NFL players, NFL coaches, or just your favorite college team might have a handful of players participating. It's a great thing, great moment. But most importantly, most imperatively, this is the start of our draft coverage for the 2026 off-season and draft season, man. We've been doing this for 2 years now. on the YouTube platform. It has been an absolute honor and joy and privilege for me to be able to hand you guys this content. So once again, guys, like, comment, and for the love of God, please subscribe to be able to keep this thing going. Once again, this is your host, Steven Trader, giving you a recap of the 2026 Senior Bowl. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching, and have a blessed day.